So welcome again, and I'm going to hand over to Terri now, who's going to be talking about psychological safety in teams. There will be questions at the end if we have time, so do think of those as we go through, and if we have time, we'll certainly come and get those answered. So over to you, Terri.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to say thanks for everybody turning up. The room does look a lot bigger from this end. So today I just wanted to talk about psychological safety and how that helped me in Rowe, which was one of the companies involved in this. So I want to talk about psychological safety, why it's important to me. I want to talk about this box that I have here. Then I want to talk about a little bit about the psychology of things, and then I want to talk about why labelling is dangerous and how we go about creating safe environments, and then go over some of the benefits for the company. So what do we mean by psychological safety? So psychological safety is basically creating an environment where people can bring their whole selves to work, and they don't need to worry about making mistakes. They're not going to be reprimanded, and basically everybody just feels safe to thrive and to be themselves. So I want to talk about this box that I have here, and what I want to do is I'd like somebody, it's kind of a bit interactive, and I'd like somebody to come up and join me on the stage at some point. I've got some fancy dress and stuff in here, a clown outfit, but we'll come back to that in a bit later. So I want to talk about this guy on the screen. So I don't know what you all think of him when you see him. He's obviously at a stag do, he's best man at a wedding. He looks quite happy, he looks quite confident. He's obviously having a good time, and he's probably hilarious, and everybody's having a nice time and laughing at him. But what you don't see by looking at this picture is somebody who's been struggling with their identity for years. They've essentially been living two completely separate lives, and they'd got to the point where they were struggling to cope. And I'm sure that you probably all realised that person was me. So I just want to talk a little bit about how I got to that stage. So from a young age, from about 7 or 8, it was really obvious that things weren't quite lining up. And my mum used to take quite a lot of, she used to tell me off quite a lot about wearing my sister's clothes because I was a twin. And that kind of carried on, and eventually she got really annoyed with me, so then she would tell me that she was going to take me to school like that, and that kind of taught me that it wasn't safe to be me. So what I started to do was put up lots of barriers around myself and pretend to be somebody else, which was this guy here. As time went on, I went to the doctors, and the doctor reassured that my mum life wasn't going to turn into a girl. So that kind of carried on, but when I was born in the 70s, and in the 80s I was kind of a teenager, and in the 80s we had Section 28. So Section 28 stopped any talk of like LGBT stuff. So I never saw anybody like me. So I just ended up thinking I was broken, and it wasn't until I was probably about 16, 17 that I actually saw somebody else who was transgender. It was one of the models, Caroline Cossie, she was on one of the James Bond films. And that was like, oh my God, that was the first time that I'd heard about other people like me. And it was kind of that feeling, I'm not broken, I'm just a bit different, that's all. So then my life just carried on, and I got married, had kids and things like that. But it was always there. It was this kind of like dusty box in the corner of my mind. So eventually, I decided to seek help and support groups and stuff, because it was really difficult for anybody to actually get to know me because I'd built up so many defences. So this is kind of... So then the next thing I had to do was coming out, and I'm not sure whether anybody in this room has ever had to do this, but you can kind of imagine it as like pulling the rug out from under everybody's feet. People think that they know who you are, but you know they've only scratched the surface because you won't let them in. So I've seen lots of my friends coming out and things, and I've seen a few of them lose absolutely everything and end up like sofa surfing and you know, being homeless. So to do that was like a really like scary kind of thing to do. some of the questions that I had was, am I going to lose my family? Sadly, I did lose some family, and I did lose quite a lot of friends as well. Will I be loved? And that's, I think, and this is something we touch on a bit later on, about everybody wants to belong and feel loved and valued. But again, none of that really changed. From relationships, I was just fishing from a different pond. Turned out there's a whole lot of gay people out there, so that was all fine. But it was all good. And then I've met my partner, who's amazing. She's probably watching this, so I've got to big her up. So we've been together about 5 years now, and it's our anniversary tomorrow, actually. And then there's my kids. What about my kids? And all of my kind of thoughts around that was all based on my experiences in the 70s and 80s. But what I realised was that everything's moved on. So my daughter, she has her friends around. Some of them are gay. She's got friends who are trans, and it's a completely different world now. So the big question was, how do I even do this? Because obviously it's not something that everybody does every day. You wouldn't do it if you wanted to. So this is where Hannah and Paul's creating a psychologically safe environment from day one was really good, and this is where one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this today. So that's probably the face I pulled when I sent the email to Hannah and said, I've got something to tell you. As it happened, she already rumbled me anyway, and she said that she'd been meaning to ask me what was going on, because at that point I'd been on HRT for 18 months. I've been dyeing my hair. It's like, I don't think I was fooling anybody at that point. So what we decided to do, they said that they'll take my lead. And what happened was it might have been around COVID time, where we were all working remotely. So we decided that we were going to have this murder mystery online event, which was done over Teams. So in order, as a way of just testing the water, we decided I'd be Cadence, who is an older lady. Turns out she's a bit murdery. But it was all received really well, and I got some emails who said how much they loved Cadence. So that was quite good. And then it was the whole thing about what do I put in this email? So I had to send an email within Rowe, and then I had to talk to all the other companies that I kind of dealt with. So in there, I put in there about, basically what I've just told you, and then I put in there some resources of people who might have been interested. But I wanted to reassure people that it was okay. It would be okay to make mistakes and get it all wrong occasionally, and it's okay to ask questions as well. And I think that's all about, we need to do these things just so that, people feel just feel safe, really. So with the box, it's okay. We're not gonna do any fancy dress today. However, if anybody's interested in some fancy dress for later, you know where to come. But what I'm hoping, in a non-sadistic way, is that you all felt a little bit like, oh, I didn't know this was going to be interactive, and felt a little bit like you might, that you didn't want to come up on stage and you didn't want to be the centre of attention or that person that's kind of being singled out. And what I want you to take from this, and if you take nothing else, is that's how it feels. Say, if I walk into a room, I know I'm going to be the only trans person in that room, but that's not just me. If you think of technology, for instance, it's a very male-dominated kind of industry, and we recently had a Women in Tech panel event, and on there they talked about the fact that they can be the only woman on the team, and when you're that person that's slightly different, it can be quite daunting at times. And it doesn't just extend to women in male kind of environments. It can be anybody. It can be whether you're a different ethnicity or you can be neurodivergent. If you've got some difference, then it feels you're very aware of your difference when you're in those environments. So I'd like people just to bear that in mind going forward. So next, I just want to talk about Carl Rogers and some of the things that he's talked about. So this is kind of one of my kind of passions is around psychology and counselling, and my end game is to be a therapist. When I've done some training recently, we've talked about the whole counselling stuff, and so person-centred theory is all about making sure that so basically there's two theories. So you've got like Freud and his stuff, which is all about let's fix the problem, whereas like people like Carl Rogers and Maslow, they're all about the more humanistic approach to it. So their belief is that everybody has the ability, an innate ability, to be able to know to fix their issues. So if there's something wrong and they're behaving, or they're suffering from anxiety and things, then basically, you know, we can, as a counsellor, we can kind of guide them through and get them to be in a better place. But in order to do that, we need to create an environment where people can be vulnerable and where they feel that they can open up and they can talk. And this is where I feel like there's a strong correlation between the counselling kind of approach and creating an environment in your workspace where people can be themselves. So the three main core things that we need to put in place are unconditional positive regard, which is basically if somebody comes to you and they say, oh, I've just deleted the website, I think we can all say that they didn't mean to do that, and we need to just assume that they didn't. If they do it a couple of times, you know, maybe that's a bit different. But also, like, we've all got different beliefs, we've all got different values as well, and it's kind of making sure that we're very aware that, you know, those are your values and these are mine, and we shouldn't feel a conflict about that. We should be able to just, you know, accept them as they are. The next one is empathy. So if you're like a line manager or a one-to-oneer or something like that, if somebody comes to you with a problem, it's really important to be able to put yourself in their shoes. And when I say put yourself in their shoes, I mean as far as like, so you're sat and you're looking through their eyes, you're feeling their feelings, and you're kind of almost like them at that point. So because that's the only way you're going to really understand and be able to help them. And it's very different to sympathy, because sympathy is being sat on the outside looking in and going, oh, that's unfortunate. It's not the same thing. And the final one is genuineness. And genuineness is all about being yourself. So when people are talking to you, you're not putting up like barriers or talking from a playbook or towing the company line or something. You're actually giving your opinion, and people feel like they're directly talking to you. So that's the three kind of core things that we need to have in place. So one of the things that causes quite a lot of issues in counselling, and in particular, I think there's quite a lot of overlap with creating a psychologically safe environment is something called congruence. So with congruence, what we have is we have the ideal version of ourselves, and that's the person that you want to be. That's like your kind of essence of you. But unfortunately, with society and things like that, you have to put up this real version of yourself, which is the person that's socially acceptable. And those two aren't necessarily going to line up. And then what you have is in the middle, where you've got these two versions of yourself, you have like anxiety, stress, worry, and that's kind of, you know, you can have people in that situation where then they start to feel like burnt out and they're basically miserable. But if we create an environment where people can be themselves, they can bring their whole selves to work, they can talk openly and make their views known on particular like topics or whatever, then we can start to kind of get those two to overlap. And when they overlap, we say that somebody is congruent. But if they're like poles apart, then they're incongruent, and that's the point where we don't want people to be, really. And this is where, if you're counselling, this is the areas that you would kind of focus on. So in order to give that whole thing of, you know, this is my real self, people adopt these different ways of like trying to stop people understanding, and this is kind of where I was before I transitioned. So we have people that are basically code switching. Code switching used to be kind of more talking about language and the way that you talk. I used to work for a company in London, and they always used to ask me where my tractor was. But, you know, that kind of thing, you just kind of have to and then you feel like you need to adapt, but you don't really need to. Gender expression, we've kind of covered that. Neurodivergence, so you can have people with ADHD, autism, dyslexic, dyspraxia, and that means that those people might have to, if they were swimming, they'd have to paddle faster in order to be able to get to the same place. But if they just opened up and said, "Oh, can you add meeting notes?" They wouldn't have that stress. They wouldn't have to do that. Cultural identity, people need to be able to, people have different cultures and to be able to talk about different festivals and things like that. Sexuality is another one. I think I know that, I've been on a cruise with my partner. We sat on a table with this couple all night. We've been there for hours, and at the end they asked us where our husbands were. It's yeah. And then final, mental health issues. So mental health issues, I think, is one of the most worrying ones, is where if people feel like if they're struggling and they can't talk about it, then we really need them to be able to talk about it, because that's when people start to get burnt out, and that's when potential real issues can occur. So next, I just want to briefly touch on labels. So I'm sure all of you in the audience can identify all these different labels that probably you have tagged against yourself. But the problem with labels is labels are really good for finding people like you. So if you're looking for somebody and people you can talk to and then you can get advice from, they're brilliant. But the problem that I see in quite a lot of the support groups and things that I'm involved in is that people tend to think, oh no, I can't do that because of X, Y, Z. And it's they can become very limiting, but they can also become limiting from if we stereotype people and we say they couldn't possibly do that because of X, Y, Z, and that's when things become a problem, really. So if we've got an environment where people don't feel like they can talk and they don't feel like they can say anything, what happens is we end up in this cycle where people can't make mistakes, they start blaming others, they're not going to share their views, and then nothing ever changes. So what happens is we stick with the status quo. From a company perspective, we're not innovating, we're just keeping going, really, and nothing's actually changing. So how can we change that? So the thing is that in order to create a psychologically safe environment, that needs to come from the top, and we all need to take ownership of that. And just if we make a mistake, that's fine. We've made a mistake. We can think of it as a learning opportunity. If you're uncertain about things, then also it's okay. None of us know everything. We might know a man who does, or a woman, obviously, and we can kind of talk to them and we can get those things from them. But we just need to accept that we're all human. The other thing, and this goes back to counselling again, is that you need to be very aware of the kind of the power imbalance in the relationship sometimes. So in a counselling situation, you'd want to make sure that they didn't feel like you had all the answers, because as a counsellor, you're not there to give them the answers. You're helped to facilitate them finding the answers. But in the same kind of way, if you were somebody who was particularly high up in an organisation, talking to somebody who's maybe quite junior, then they might feel like whatever they say isn't kind of relevant. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that we're bringing people into the conversation, and that we make sure that their value, that their views and their what they say is being listened to. And finally, we need to address toxic behaviour. So if somebody's mocking somebody for having a stupid idea or an idea that's not relevant, then we need to not be doing that, because otherwise people are just going to shut down and people aren't going to talk. And finally, and this kind of leads on to some future slides, is we just need to show respect. We need to make sure people feel that they're valued and that they're getting, that we want them in the company. So this kind of brings me on to Maslow. So Maslow put together this pyramid, and you've probably all done this in school and stuff. But at the top of the pyramid, we have self-actualization, and this is kind of one of the core parts of human-centered kind of therapies, is that everybody has this self-actualizing tendency, which basically means that we all want to be the best that we can, so we're all looking for personal growth. But in order to get there, we need to have these foundations in place. So we need physiological needs. So we all need to be able to buy food and water. As far as safety, we need to know that, if we make a mistake, then we're not going to lose our jobs, and we're not going to, end up unemployed. But then we get onto the more fluffy stuff, like love and belonging. So, when we're showing people that we respect them and that they're valued and that, that we really want them in the company, then they start to feel a sense of belonging. And anybody that kind of knows or has anything to do with diversity, equity, inclusion will know that there's normally a B with that, which is belonging. And when you get all those things together, then people feel that they want to be at your company. And what you'll find is that your kind of attrition rates of your colleagues will go down. People will be more engaged, so they'll be contributing, and you'll be more innovative because people feel that they can feed into stuff. And you're getting people beginning to grow now, and your company's thriving with them. So then finally, when we've got self-esteem, then that means that people, that as a colleague, we're showing them respect, and we're valuing their work. And then from there, they can start to move towards self-actualization. It's important to realize that nobody actually gets to self-actualization. That's kind of more reserved for your kind of spiritual leaders and people like, the Dalai Lama or the Pope and things like that. I don't think any of us are going to get there. Although, if you want to, give it a go. And finally, so now we've got our psychologically safe environment, and people are feeling like they can all open up and we can all talk and stuff. So now we're in this situation where people can make mistakes. We're all learning from the mistakes that we've made. People are openly sharing ideas, and now we're moving upwards as a company. We're all progressing and we're all moving forward together. So I added this into here, so because I know that there's quite a few Rowe people here, and I normally add a ham story in here. But so I thought this was a really good example of somebody that has kind of just felt empowered to be able to change things. So in 2007, Steve Jobs introduced the iPhone, and as part of that, he had a keyboard which was just a touchscreen. And when he put that forward, people like BlackBerry were like, that's a stupid idea. Everybody wants a keyboard. And I remember having a G1 and thinking, why would I want to touch on the screen? But what's happened is actually he was completely right. And now we wouldn't want a phone with a keyboard. And at the same time, Microsoft also said nobody would want to pay that much for a phone. So, if we stick with the status quo, things all stay the same, and we don't know what we're missing until we get there. Next, I just want to talk about the Aristotle project. So in 2012, Google created this project where basically what they did is they got all the big brains together, came up with a load of surveys, and they sent them out to everybody. And what the aim of the game was to try and work out what was the secret sauce of a very effective team. So what they found when they got all the stats back and all the results was that it wasn't important where the team were based, how close they were based together, who was in the team, whether people were very vocal, whether they'd been around for a long time. Can anybody guess what the secret sauce was? It was psychological safety. So psychological safety was the key one. So if people on their teams were able to speak up and disagree with things, and they could continually improve their processes and stuff, that was really good. And the next one was dependability. So people needed to feel like they could depend on their colleagues. So if somebody says that that they're going to do something, then it will be done at the right time, and we'll all we can rely on it. The next one was structure and clarity. So and I'm sure we've all been there where somebody gives you some requirements which don't really give you anything of any use. But what we need to do is we need to make sure that people know what they're doing, they know what's required of them, and then people can deliver, and we can all have a good team. And the last two are kind of more people-y type things. So we have meaning, and meaning means that somebody's doing something and it has some kind of value to the team and the people that they're doing it for. And then we have impact. So impact is basically that, there's some people are going to benefit from it. So it's kind of, that could be a societal impact or some user-based or something like that. But if you put all these 5 things in order, then that's kind of what makes for a good team from what Google has found. So the next thing is, once you've got all this stuff in place, so you've got this environment where people are all learning, we're all happy, we're all feeling engaged, and we can all make mistakes, and poor robots obviously getting it. You'll start to attract more people, attract the kind of the top talent, and you'll be like the company that people want to work for. And I'm sure that probably a lot of people here have like said to their friends, "Don't come and work at this company because it's But once you get to the point where everybody in it is growing, we're all growing together, we're innovating, then suddenly you become that company that people go, oh yeah, we need to go and work over there, and people and your friend and people will be going to their friends and say, come and work for us, and that's great, and then that's kind of where we want to be, because then we as a company we've also got the best people. On top of that, what we've got is if you get people that are more diverse and potentially marginalised groups, then you're attracting them as well, because they know that they can kind of fit in and they can kind of feel safe and non-judged and stuff. And when you start to attract people that have like come from a diverse range of perspectives, then you start to see all the blanks, all the little niche areas that you've never seen before, and potentially you can open up market areas that you wouldn't have done before. And obviously you've also got a perceived like better brand as well, because people were like thinking, well, that's like a great company. So Deloitte did some research on this, and what they found was, in order to be able to maximize your kind of increase in revenue, then what you need is 2 different types of diversity. So you need cognitive diversity, which is about the way that people think and approach problems. So, whether you're, some people are creative thinkers, some people are more logical thinkers, but then outside that you've got like neurodiverse people who can approach things in different ways. So potentially, so I think GCHQ, I think they've got a page on their website about attracting people that are dyslexic, because they found out that they are very good at spotting patterns. So once you've got all this kind of stuff, so you've got your cognitive diversity, but then you've also got your demographically diverse talent as well. And these people are then able to spot all of the little holes in potentially like a market. So like we saw earlier, if anybody else was in here, about people washing potatoes. So potentially if you had somebody from that area, they would all know all about washing potatoes. The other thing is, when you have like a group that are very, very different, you end up with a different way of thinking. So if you've got a group of people that are all very, very similar, you end up with something called groupthink. And what groupthink does is it basically means that everybody, like the decision that you come to is kind of best for the group, and it's like the most harmonious solution that you can come to, but not necessarily the best solution. When you've got like groups of people that are very different, what happens is that you have to think differently, because you can't get that harmony. So what happens is you end up with people like critically thinking rather than just coming up with this groupthink. And what they've actually found is that these people, when they're in this situation and they're thinking critically, then they can actually make decisions a lot faster. I think it says 6 times here, but I think it was like 60% or something quicker. But then you also get a rounded solution with probably less holes in it. And the other thing is, because you've got a diverse team, you can kind of see potential risks as well. So an example that I came across was McDonald's had launched into the Chinese market, and their advert was a man kneeling and begging for a burger in a burger joint. But what they failed to realise, probably maybe because they didn't have anything of anybody with that cultural kind of knowledge, it was not generally called CQ, in their team, was that when, like, in the Chinese culture, kneeling is a sign of like humility, And it kind of got a real backlash, and it kind of damaged their brand. So, having diverse teams is really important for identifying some of these potential risks. So originally I had a whole load of slides with stats in here, and I showed it to my partner, and she yawned all the way through it. So we've got this instead. So I want to talk about Unilever and what they did. So they decided that they were going to come up with a sustainable living plan in 2010, and their plan was to provide social impact, so helping society as a whole, and reducing their environmental footprint. And there was three main drivers for change, and it wasn't all just because they wanted to. So what research had found is that 68% of consumers would see brands more favourably if they were doing something for society. So at that particular time, Unilever had a really bad rep with the environmental damage that they were doing. So obviously that was going against them. On top of that, we had regulatory pressure. So the EU had just introduced some new legislation, which meant that they had to keep up with that. And then the competitors had already got into the doing this kind of stuff as well. So it meant that they had to kind of keep up with the Joneses kind of situation. So what they did is they tasked their 28 brands with decreasing their environmental footprint. But in order to do that, they created a diverse workforce that kind of represented their customer base. So they got to see and discuss things and see the things that actually mattered to their customers. And then they tasked all of the people in leadership positions within Unilever to make sure that people could speak up and go and challenge everything. So if they thought, no, we shouldn't be doing this, or we could do this better, then everybody could just speak up and do, and things could happen. And then they put together these kind of knowledge sharing forums where multidiscipline teams could come together and they could all discuss it. And there wasn't particularly any kind of hierarchy there. So finally, so what they found from this was that their kind of engagement of their employees went up significantly, and they also found that their employee satisfaction went higher because they were all invested and they're feeling like they could actually make a difference. From their profitability, because now we're innovating and we're looking for better ways of doing stuff, their sales increased, and their sustainable brands were one of the fastest growing parts of the organisation. So you can kind of see that actually, this stuff does actually make a difference. So this is kind of the end of my presentation. So from this, I just wanted to summarize. So it's really important to create a situation where people can feel that they can make a difference and they're empowered and they feel respected, and then we can create a sense of belonging where everybody can thrive and reach their kind of goals. From if you've got psychological safety in your company, then basically it makes good financial sense as well, because people are going to give more, and you don't want people who aren't engaged in your company kind of thing. And finally, and this is something that I always think about, is you don't know what people are going through. There might be people in this room right now that are going through all sorts of things that we know nothing about, and it's just just be kind and just be the reason why that person smiles today. That's kind of it. I don't know whether we've got time for questions. Have we got time for this?
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you, Terri. We do have 10 minutes for questions, so I'm not sure if I'll be able to sprint as effectively as before, but I'll give it a go. But yeah, has anyone got any questions to kick off? Any questions about psychological safety in your own teams? Okay.
Not really a question, but I just wanted to endorse what you said right at the very end. If you go through some form of trauma, it really kind of enhances your awareness to others. And I went through a very painful divorce about 3 years ago, and it made me really aware that other people I'm walking by in the street may be going through something similar. So, don't be too judgmental. So I just really want to applaud you for, kind of sending that message home today, because you don't know what other people are going through.
No.
And it's free to be kind, and it's cool. So thank you for saying that.
Cool.
Thank you.
Okay.
So, sorry.
I was just going to say, here's the feedback slide. If anybody wants to give me any feedback, I will just remind you to be kind.
So I've worked with a couple of people that identified as things. One of them had a fetish that he loved to tell other people about, and the other one was part of a culture that had a problem with another culture. And when they shared that, it made people uncomfortable. I guess, how do people know the boundaries of this is me, this is what I can do, and this is me, this is hurting other people?
Yeah, so I've seen this, and this kind of thing comes up quite often. And I think what they generally say is bring your professional self to work, because there is always going to be that limit to things. Obviously, like talking about a counselling situation again, what you would do is, because you have, we've all, as you say, we've all got our values and we've all got our kind of beliefs and things like that. So in a counselling situation, if it was something that you really couldn't deal with, you would try and find them somebody else, because otherwise you end up with that conflict. But obviously there's always going to be that kind of trade-off.
Great. Yep, got another one here.
Thank you so much for your talk. It was really awesome. One of my amazing colleagues set up a book club at work, and at the moment we're reading a book, The ABCs of LGBT, which is really cool and starts talking about different spectrums and things like that. I was just wondering if you could advise on any other resources that might be particularly useful for people to bring into the workplace to get these conversations happening in our teams more.
Don't know, not any particular resources. I think maybe a speaker's usually quite good if there's a particular topic that you're interested in. The only other thing is maybe is find some colleagues that might want to talk about their experience. I think that people's kind of lived experience is probably worth more than reading a book. That's my personal take on it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any final questions we've got? Yep, brilliant.
Hi, Terri.
Hi.
So you mentioned about I think specific example about somebody being neurodivergent and asking for meeting notes, and you're talking about how important it is to create that environment where people can speak up. Is there anything more that you think places are lacking, where they're not really maybe putting the onus on themselves to maybe signpost what is available for people to kind of make sure that they're promoting that? Is there any kind of gaps, do you think?
So I think, again, back to awareness training and I don't know, it depends on what the size of the organisation is, but people talking about their lived experiences and why it's, the challenges that they kind of see every day. But then also, it's kind of, I think maybe just making some kind of resources available within your work, your company or something, just highlighting the different types of neurodivergence that you can have. At CACI, where I am now, we've just launched neurodiversity champions. So people now have somebody that they can seek out if they think potentially I'm struggling and it could be this. They've got somebody to talk to, and then they can signpost and they can have those discussions. So that's something that's potentially worth looking at.
Thank you. Great. Any last questions? Any final points? Okay. Yeah.
Any ideas on how to check if a new organisation you might be interviewing with or wanting to move to genuinely has a culture of psychological safety or a good culture? Because inevitably in interviews people behave themselves, don't they? Nobody's going to say to you, "Oh no, it's bad here." Is there anything you can do to kind of get that proper sense, do you think?
Personally, if I was looking for an organisation, which I'm not, But if you were, then in the past I've kind of looked at like their websites and how they interact with things like, you know, potentially LinkedIn or social media and things like that, and looked for stuff that makes you think, actually, no, these people are invested, and or, you know, potentially maybe that they're not, and it's kind of very kind of thin veneer of like kind of acceptance. It's quite difficult to know from the outside unless this is where it's important to kind of, if you're doing good stuff within your organisation, to talk about it, because, you know, if you are like a marginalised group, then you're going to be looking for that stuff, that kind of thing, to make you feel, no, actually, this is a really good company to go and work for. But if you're not doing it, then you know you're missing out on that talent. I don't know whether that answers your question.
Always good fun to go and snoop around Glassdoor as well. On that one. Any more questions before we wrap up this session? Yes.
Hi, thanks very much for your talk. I think with psychological safety, it's one of the things I look at trying to do is give people a right to pass. So if you're doing activities and you're doing some kind of thing in a workshop, is giving them the right to just step out of it and not do it. And I think having that, and also like some kind of check-in. So if you're doing something where it's just like, it could be a psychological safety check-in where you want, how are you feeling today? Or where do you sit on this scale? Whether you want to engage. Do you know what I mean? Because I think sometimes we assume everyone's 100% in on an activity just because you're facilitating it. And other times you just need to have that awareness. I think so, yeah. I think the other observation for psychological safety, and I'd be keen to hear your thoughts, is you can't just switch it on or off. And I've been in organisations where they've said, this is a psychological safe space. Yeah. So contribute. And you're like, doesn't feel like it. Yeah. So how, I guess, the question I'll ask is, how do you go about promoting a psychological safe session?
I think, as you say, it kind of needs to be, the organisation needs to be a psychologically safe environment, because you can't kind of, you either is or it isn't kind of thing. And as far as like, you know, if you are organising events and things, it's kind of thinking about all those different things where people struggle. So for instance, in CACI, you know, there's always thought about, have we got like a quiet space? If people are going to struggle, you know, so just somewhere where they can go and take some time out and kind of things like that. And it's just like, so it's kind of just being mindful of those things, I think. And I don't know what I remember.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we should give Terri a huge round of applause. Thank you very much.